Hi, it's Miss Q here to teach you how to make a graph using a sheet, a data table in Google Sheets. We have height and arm length that we measured, and of course height is our independent variable and arm length is our dependent variable. The arm length is the thing that we were really looking to measure, the last thing that we found out. So that is the dependent variable. It depends on our height. In order to make a graph, we'll highlight our data. Over here we'll say insert, and we want to insert that graph into this Google Sheet. Google calls a graph chart. We call them graphs. So we'll just insert a chart, and we need to pick the chart type, and if you scroll down, chart type, scatter plot, because we want to see how these two variables relate to each other. You can already kind of see a trend starting up here, but we want to add things that need to be added so that we know what this graph is about. We'll hit insert to insert it into our data table and pull it over here so we can still see our data. This little arrow over here has an advanced edit, which we'll go into, and we will add a title to this graph, and we'll call it height versus arm length. For students. We'll come down here and we'll look at the horizontal axis. We'll put a label. They call it title. We call it label. Horizontal axis means along the horizon like this. So over here we were going to call that height, and of course we have to include the units in parentheses. And since there's no smaller grid lines here, I'd like to add a few. And our min and our max look pretty good. It kind of fits the data pretty well, so I don't have to put that in there, but you could shorten this up and put in whatever you want the minimum. Here is 130, and the maximum to be. Those are pretty good. These major grid lines, I might put 10 in there, and we could put 4 little grid lines in between so we can see and count 131, 132, 133. There's no way to put tick marks in here, but if we could, we would. So that's our horizontal axis with height in centimeters as our label and units. And let's go back up here, and now we'll try our vertical axis. Vertical means up and down, and this is our dependent axis. And our variable here is arm length. And of course, we have to include the units. Oops, let's spell that right. And again, our data looks pretty good. 35 to, we could make 35 to 65. Let's do that. 35 to 65. And that makes it look a lot better. And we would like to have some smaller units in there. Let's try 4 lines in between each of those. And we see we have a nice graph. And when we come through here and highlight each of these points, we can see the coordinates for that point. For instance, this point is 136 down here for the height. That's the x value, and over here is the y value of 40.35 for our arm length. So that looks pretty good. Now the one last thing that we didn't talk about is trend line. If we want to put a trend line in there, we might want to put a line to show if we had lots of data, what would all our data really start to gather around. So we'll put a trend line in that's linear like a line. And right in here is a trend line that shows if we kept gathering data, most probably it would start to center around this. And we get a little equation, y equals 0.49x minus 22.06. That means the 0.49x is called 0.469 is the slope, and the y-intercept is minus 22.065. Later on, I think a number of you will learn to see what that is. And then all we need to do is say update, and we look back here and we have a beautiful graph.